Why humans need lies to stay sane. Let me ask you something that might shake the ground beneath your feet. What would happen if, just for 1 hour, you were forced to see reality exactly as it is, without filters, without stories, without any comforting illusions? No sugarcoating, no distraction. Just the raw, unedited truth of your existence, your mortality, your insignificance in the cosmic scale, and the terrifying randomness of everything you love. Most of us wouldn't survive it. Not psychologically, not spiritually. But this isn't just poetic exaggeration. It's a philosophical fact that thinkers from Nietzsche to Camus have hinted at, but rarely stated so bluntly. We need lies to stay sane. And this video is going to take you into the deepest layers of that uncomfortable truth. It sounds strange, maybe even wrong. Haven't we always been told that truth sets us free? That honesty is the highest virtue? That reality, no matter how painful, is preferable to delusion? But here's the contradiction we never talk about. We say we love truth, but we build entire civilizations on lies. We lie to our children about Santa Claus to protect their innocence. We lie to ourselves about love lasting forever to make relationships feel safer. We lie in our resumes, in our social media posts, in our daily conversations. Not because we're evil or manipulative, but because we're human. And being human means living with limitations. Our brains weren't built to handle infinite complexity, total uncertainty, or existential horror. So we simplify, we narrate, we filter. In short, we lie.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But these aren't just any lies. They're functional lies. Lies that serve a purpose. Lies that help us survive. But take the idea of meaning. Most people walk around with a vague sense that life has purpose, that suffering leads somewhere, that things happen for a reason. But step outside the human bubble for a second, and you see how completely insane that idea is. The universe has no agenda. Earthquakes don't care who they kill. Disease doesn't choose its victims by moral worth. And yet we tell ourselves stories, religious, spiritual, even secular ones, to make sense of it. Why? Because without those stories, the chaos would crush us. The human mind needs order, even if it has to invent it. Let's go deeper. Think about memory. We like to believe that our memories are accurate, faithful recordings of the past. But neuroscience tells us otherwise. But memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall a moment, you alter it. You edit it. You reshape it based on your current beliefs, your current emotional state, your current needs. Why? Because a perfectly accurate memory of every mistake, every embarrassment, every trauma would paralyze you. So your brain lies to protect you. It blurs the edges. It exaggerates the good. It reframes the bad. It gives you a version of the past you can live with. And we call this mental health. Now ask yourself, if your own brain lies to you constantly, subtly, relentlessly, how much of your identity is built on fiction, on the story of who you are? The sense that you're a good person, the belief that your life is on some kind of trajectory. These aren't facts, they're narratives. And yet, they're necessary, because without them, you'd be adrift. You'd wake up each morning in a storm of meaningless sensations. You wouldn't know how to act, who to trust, or what to want. So we create these inner myths, not because we're weak, but because we are biological organisms trying to function in a world that doesn't care whether we understand it or not. Philosophers like Ernest Becker took this further. In his work, The Denial of Death, he argued that everything we call culture, art, religion, science, love is ultimately a defense mechanism against the terror of death. We know we're going to die. We know that nothing lasts. And yet, we can't live in constant terror. So we build symbolic systems, legacies, institutions, ideologies that make us feel part of something eternal. That lie, that beautiful lie, is the foundation of civilization. And yet, here's the paradox: the more self-aware you become, the harder it gets to believe your own lies. Once you start seeing the strings, it's hard to go back to the puppet show. That's why thinkers, artists, and philosophers often wrestle with depression, isolation, even madness. They see too much. They feel too much. They lose the ability to believe in the comforting fictions that keep everyone else going. And the world doesn't reward that. It punishes it. It calls it cynicism or negativity, when in fact it's just clarity. So here's the question I want you to sit with. What lies are you currently living within, and how much of your happiness depends on them? If you stripped away every illusion, every comforting belief, every socially agreed upon fiction, what would be left? Would that version of reality be livable? Or does sanity itself require a certain amount of self-deception? The myth of objectivity, why facing reality is harder than you think. We like to think we see the world clearly, that we're rational, informed, logical beings who navigate life based on facts. But that belief, ironically, is one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. Because the truth is, there is no such thing as pure objectivity. It's a myth, a comforting fantasy we cling to in order to feel in control. The world is far too complex, too chaotic, too layered for our minds to process it without distortion. So instead of seeing things as they are, we see them as we are. And that distinction changes everything. Just think about how perception works. Your brain doesn't record reality like a camera, it interprets it. It filters, prioritizes, and shapes sensory input based on what it already believes. Two people can witness the exact same event and walk away with completely different interpretations, not because one is lying, but because their internal frameworks are different. Their histories, their traumas, their desires, their values. You don't see the world as it is, you see it through a lens that's been crafted by every experience you've ever had. And that lens has blind spots. It has cracks. It has distortions. But we rarely question it because it feels so natural. And here's where it gets dangerous. When we forget that our perspective is subjective, we begin to confuse comfort with truth. We assume that what feels right must be right, that what aligns with our worldview must be real. And we surround ourselves with people, media, and environments that reinforce those beliefs. We curate our reality to protect our sanity. And in doing so, we create echo chambers. Not just online, but in our own minds. We filter out discomfort. We block out contradiction. We avoid anything that might force us to re-examine the scaffolding of our beliefs. But what happens when reality doesn't cooperate? When something breaks through the filter: loss, betrayal, illness, failure, and it doesn't fit the story we've built. That's when the illusion of objectivity starts to crack. And for many people, that moment unleashes a crisis. Because if the story was wrong, then who are we? What do we believe? What is true? Most people don't want to face those questions. So they double down. They reinforce the lie. They blame others. They retreat into certainty. Because the alternative, truly confronting the uncertainty and complexity of life, is terrifying. This is why we need lies, not just to stay sane, but to avoid collapse. Because facing reality in its raw, unfiltered form is psychologically exhausting. It's emotionally destabilizing. It forces us to live in the unknown. And the unknown is where anxiety lives, where fear festers, where we are no longer gods of our own stories, but vulnerable creatures drifting in an indifferent universe. And yet, this is the paradox. The more we chase objectivity, the more we realize how subjective we truly are. The more we seek truth, the more we're forced to confront how much of our identity is built on carefully constructed narratives. Even science, the supposed temple of objectivity, is deeply human. It relies on models, assumptions, paradigms, many of which get overturned over time. But what we accept today as truth might be tomorrow's error. Newton was right until Einstein proved him incomplete. Einstein might be right until someone else proves him limited. And yet we cling to the illusion that we've arrived, and that we finally know, because not knowing is unbearable. But what if we flip the frame? What if the goal wasn't to escape subjectivity, but to understand it, to become aware of our mental filters, and to recognize our biases, to admit that we are not objective observers of the world, but participants in a shared hallucination? That doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. It means our access to it is always partial, always filtered, always colored by who we are. And once we accept that, we can stop pretending. We can stop the exhausting performance of certainty and start living with a different kind of strength, the strength to not know. And maybe that's the real path forward, not to eliminate the lies, but to become conscious of them. To ask ourselves again and again, is this belief helping me see clearly or just helping me cope? Do I want the truth or do I want to feel safe? These are not academic questions. They are the foundation of a life that's awake. Because the truth is, most of us are not afraid of being wrong, we're afraid of what being wrong means. We're afraid of rebuilding, or of letting go, of starting over. So we hold on to the myths. We defend the lies. Not because we're dishonest, but because we're human. And being human means needing just enough illusion to survive the weight of being alive. The beautiful lie, how fiction becomes our reality, if you pause for a moment and look around, not just physically, but culturally, socially, but emotionally, you'll notice something strange. Almost everything that gives life meaning isn't real in the objective sense. Nations, money, success, love stories, religions, even the idea of a self, these are all fictions. Not lies in the malicious sense, but constructed stories we've agreed to live inside because they give shape to the chaos. They are beautiful lies, and they are absolutely essential. Without them, life would collapse into unbearable ambiguity. And yet, these fictions dominate our reality. They structure our days, drive our decisions, and define our identities. The paradox is that we create these illusions, then forget we created them, and finally live under their rule as if they were laws of nature. Let's start with one of the most pervasive, the idea of success. What is it really? Is it money? Status? Legacy? Stability? Ask 10 people and you'll get 10 answers, each one shaped by a different cultural narrative. But none of those definitions exist in the natural world. You won't find success under a microscope or written in the stars. It's a story we tell ourselves to motivate our actions, to justify our sacrifices, to compare ourselves against others. And it works. It drives innovation, discipline, progress. But it's still a fiction. And when we forget that, when we treat it as an absolute truth, we suffer. We chase goals that don't fulfill us. We burn out trying to meet expectations that were never ours to begin with. We trade peace for performance. Or take love, perhaps the most sacred and universal human experience, and also one of the most mythologized. From movies to novels to songs, we're inundated with the idea that love should look a certain way, feel a certain way, last forever, solve everything. But real love is messy. It's imperfect. It's often fleeting. And yet, we cling to the story because it's beautiful, because it gives us hope, because it offers the illusion of completion in a world that often feels fractured. And that illusion, while not entirely true, gives us something to hold on to, something to believe in, something to strive for. Even the concept of you, your identity, your history, your personality is a kind of fiction. Not in a nihilistic sense, but in the sense that it's a story you've been telling yourself since childhood. A story shaped by what others told you, by what you chose to remember, by what you hope to become. And, like any story, it changes, it evolves, it edits itself. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You won't be the same person 10 years from now. But we need the illusion of a stable self because it anchors us. It allows us to make decisions, to take responsibility, to grow. Without it, we dissolve into uncertainty. Now, here's the twist. These lies are not the enemy. They are tools. They are scaffolding. They are the symbolic architecture that allows us to build meaning in a meaningless universe. And when we use them consciously, they empower us. But when we forget their constructs, when we confuse the map for the territory, we become trapped. We start measuring our lives by someone else's fiction. We start suffering because reality doesn't match the script we've been handed. And that's when lies become prisons. Think about the systems we live in: governments, markets, laws, currencies. Every one of them is a collective fiction. They only work because we agree that they're real. A $100 bill is worthless paper without that agreement. A border is just a line on a map unless we choose to enforce it. But these fictions allow us to cooperate, to organize, to build civilizations. So we pretend they're real not because we're delusional, but because we're practical. And in that pretending, we make them real. They acquire weight, consequences, power. This is the strange magic of human consciousness. We can take a lie, believe in it deeply enough, and make it true through action. We can will reality into being through shared belief. And sometimes that's beautiful. It's what gives us art, justice, friendship, dreams. But it also means we must be vigilant. Because if we're not careful, we inherit fictions that do more harm than good. We internalize stories that were never meant for us. We live out scripts that were written by fear, by control, by conformity. So the question becomes, which lies are worth living by and which ones are worth letting go? Not all lies are equal. Some nourish us. Others suffocate us. Some build bridges. Others build walls. It's not about rejecting every illusion. It's about becoming aware, about choosing your fictions intentionally, about asking yourself, is this belief helping me grow or keeping me small? Did I choose this story or was it chosen for me? And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful kind of freedom isn't found in truth alone, but in the conscious use of illusion. In knowing that the stories we live by are not absolute, but malleable. And in that knowing, we gain the power not just to survive, but to create. Truth as a burden, why total honesty can destroy you. There's a dangerous idea floating through modern culture, the belief that absolute honesty is always virtuous. That the more honest you are, the more authentic, noble, or enlightened you become. But here's a truth most people won't admit: total honesty can destroy you. Not because truth is bad, but because the human mind isn't built to carry all of it at once. Truth, in its rawest form, is overwhelming. It's sharp, it's cold. It doesn't care about your comfort, your dreams, or your plans. And if you try to live in that space stripped of all illusion, all narrative, all softening filters, you don't become stronger. You unravel. Imagine waking up tomorrow fully conscious of every injustice happening in the world. Every war, every child suffering, every act of cruelty, every ecological collapse. Then add to that the full awareness of your own limitations, your mortality, your insignificance, your inability to fix even a fraction of what's broken. Could you function? Could you go to work, make small talk, plan your weekend? Probably not. That's not strength. That's paralysis. And that's what total honesty looks like when it's untethered from compassion and context. This is why, throughout history, even the wisest thinkers have warned against unfiltered truth. But in Plato's allegory of the cave, the prisoner who escapes and sees the real world doesn't come back enlightened. He's blinded, disoriented, traumatized. When he returns to the cave to tell the others, they don't celebrate him. They reject him. Because truth, when it's not asked for, feels like violence. It shatters the illusions that make life bearable. And sometimes, people would rather live in the shadows than face the light unprepared. Even in our personal lives, we see this. Think of the relationships that fall apart after radical honesty, the friendships that unravel because someone just had to speak their truth, the families fractured by confessions that served no purpose except to relieve guilt. Honesty without wisdom is just cruelty wearing a virtue mask. And the hard lesson is this: truth requires timing, tact, and mercy. It's not a weapon to be thrown, but a responsibility to be carried. So where does that leave us? Are we supposed to lie to ourselves and others forever? Not exactly. The point isn't to abandon truth, it's to recognize that truth alone isn't enough. We need stories, metaphors, art, symbols. We need rituals and myths and metaphysical scaffolding to make truth digestible, to give it shape, to make it human. That's why religion, even when it's not literally true, continues to shape lives. That's why fiction, poetry, and film often reveal deeper truths than facts ever could, because they translate the unbearable into the beautiful. And maybe that's what it means to be wise, not to know everything, but to know how much truth a person can bear and when, to tell the right story at the right time, and to know which illusions to preserve until someone is strong enough to shed them. That's not deception, that's compassion. That's love, and it's the very thing that keeps us sane. So ask yourself, am I chasing truth because I want to grow or because I want to escape responsibility? Am I ready for the truths I say I want? Or do I need, for now, the gentle lie that lets me keep walking? We live in a world obsessed with authenticity, But sometimes the most authentic thing you can do is admit that you still need the story, that you still need a little fiction to keep your heart beating, that the truth will come but not all at once. And that's okay, because real strength isn't found in total exposure, it's found in choosing which truths to carry and which to lay down for now. That is not weakness, that is wisdom, and it might be the only kind of honesty that can save us